And the kick that I get out of driving past somewhere and saying like, I worked on that job or I built that house. I've really enjoyed my time on the tools as a builder. I've now progressed to running a company. It's very office intense. It's very like lots of chats, lots of coffees, and I've embraced that transition.
Man, these guys do a good coffee.
I would love to be on the tools more. I can't, the phone's always ringing. I need to trust my builders to be on site doing their job.
Oh yeah!
And I need to be around basically talking to everyone. It's a whole bunch of relationships. Hey, I'm Josh, a builder here in New Zealand, and today I'm going to talk to you about 5 things I love about being a builder. Coffee first though. That's number 1 actually, Smoko. So number 1, I vividly remember first week of being on site and just really loving being outside and being physical. Up until that point, I had worked in restaurants and in management and in offices. It was a lot of like using my head, a lot of paperwork, a lot of talking. I really enjoyed the transition to doing physical work. I enjoyed that feeling of coming home at the end of the day, tired but satisfied with what I've done. Like, yeah, it's physically demanding, but I found that rewarding in terms of, you know, like even just get the blood flowing and you're outside and you're in nature and you're in the sun and the wind and the rain, and sometimes you hate all of those things, but honestly you learn to love it as well. Number 2, I really enjoyed working with my hands. I remember when I first started, using something like a skill saw was scary and it'd be all wavy, and now it's just like, oh yeah mate, I'll cut that, and you just, like even learning things like how to guide it with your fingers and how to cut a straight line. I'm not a master craftsman with tools, but I know my way around all of these tools. I'm confident to use them. I can see something that needs to be done and my hands have the skill to do it. I think it's really rewarding. It's kind of like cooking as well, that like hand-eye coordination crosses over to building. So that moves on to part number 3. I really love tools. I remember being a kid and I'd go around the tool shop with my dad, and you know, so now I own a drill and a saw and a nail gun and a chainsaw, and I know how to use them. You know, I love that I've got a toolkit and a bunch of tools and that I can do things with them. Yeah, it sounds really cheesy, but sometimes it's like just real satisfying to like get it, screw a screw in perfectly or screw a row in. Or I think what's more satisfying is knowing what tool to do what job, or when you don't quite have the right tool for the job but you find a way to use the tools you've got. That leads on to number 4. I love creating stuff. When I worked in the restaurants, it's kind of like every day, you know, you serve these customers, you do a great job, and then they disappear and a new set of customers come in and you're at square one again. What I noticed about being on a building site is every day you're adding to yesterday's work. Even if it's digging holes, yesterday we dug these holes, now we're putting something in the holes, now we're bracing it up, now we're pouring concrete. Now we're building something on top of the things that we concreted into those holes. Whether it's a house or a deck or a fence or a tiny little reno, it's a combination of every job you've done builds towards that final picture. And sometimes that picture is in your mind, sometimes it's in your client's mind, sometimes it's on a plan and it's your job to bring it to life. It's kind of like the enjoyment that you get building a Lego set, you get to do that in real life with real big stuff. And the kick that I get out of driving past somewhere and saying like, I worked on that job or I built that house or I remember changing that window over there. Point number 5, Smoko. Or just the general vibe of like being on site, being with your mates, enjoying it, being out in the sun, having, you know, tools down and having a coffee and then just sitting around having a yarn for 30 minutes. Again, coming from a restaurant scene where everyone took staggered breaks and your breaks were rushed and it was kind of like this pressure to get everyone's breaks out, and then going to the building site and it's 10 o'clock and tools down and everyone sits down, everyone has Smoko, you eat a lot of food, you have a laugh, you have a yarn, and then you get back into work. And I really enjoy kind of like Smoko kind of represents that camaraderie of like working with your workmates and achieving something together. You know, when you're working side by side with someone 40 hours a week, you can't help but get to know them and their ups and their downs and what's going on in their life. That's what Smoko represents to me. So that's the first 5 things I love about building, but I'm going to tell you 4 more bonus points that I've just realized After you go ahead and click subscribe. Bonus number 6. I really like my music, and so I love getting to site and putting the radio on.
Talking about the Hypepool Therapy Workday, which you got yourself $1,000 cash today. Roy did it.
The Edge is okay sometimes if you're in a bit of a poppy mood. I also love just blasting Bluetooth. I also have Bluetooth headphones. If I'm doing a job solo or working around the house by myself, I love just tuning this on, chucking on some music or chucking on a podcast and just going in the zone.
That's like when you're sick of your mate.
What's that, Sam? I can't hear you. I'm in the zone. Bonus number 7. When you're kind of doing a real repetitive manual task like digging or jibbing or nailing off 1,000 bracket nails, I really enjoy chucking my headphones on and just going in the zone, and it's kind of like a real good time for those things in my mind to bubble to the surface and a chance for me to process them. Bonus tip number 8, you really use your brain when you're building. Lots of adding up, lots of numbers, lots of thinking. You really use those like cognitive parts of your brain. You've got to think about like how to visualize something and how the pieces click together. As you move up towards being a qualified builder, you use your brain way more than people realize, and there's so much that goes into thinking about how you're going to put everything together. But you also work out how to break down something like a big giant house into little chunks. And I think that's a little bit of a metaphor for life. You take these big giant goals and you chunk them into lots and lots of little steps, but each step adds up to the other. There's been some days where like you just got not a care in the world, the saw's out, the music's going, you're cutting, you're hammering, you're fixing off, and you're just in the zone, you're with your mates, you're having a real good time. I think there's not one key day, but a number of days that I've remembered that are just super enjoyable. Bonus number 9 is the relationships. Not just with the couple of cool guys that you work with, but you interact with so many other sub-trades. You interact with the plumber and the sparky and the drain layer and the digger driver, and you're kind of like all in the industry together. And then most likely, if you work for a small team, you're going to use those same people over and over and over. And so like the digger driver that I use now on my sites is the guy that was driving diggers when I was an apprentice. Some of these guys, you get to know them and their lives and their families and their hobbies, and you just become this big giant team. Boom, that's it.